Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. Rain touched nothing gently that morning. It came in sheets, slanting hard against coat sleeves and umbrellas, pooling fast along the cracks of old paving stones. Wind scraped through black coats gathered tight, faces turned downward, not for grief but to shield from grit and cold. No one lingered longer than was polite. One by one, they folded away. Gravel shifted beneath leather soles as the last handful of dirt hit the coffin lid. No flowers, no hymns. Just earth, cold and silent, reclaiming what was left of a man few had remembered while he was still breathing. The minister's voice had quivered at the name, half-read from a card. There had been no eulogy. At the edge of the cemetery, beneath a half-collapsed canopy, stood a man whose eyes did not move from the box. He hadn't wept. Something older than grief had hardened in him long ago, the kind of quiet that doesn't pass for strength, only distance. A woman pressed a paper cup into his hand. Lukewarm coffee. It steamed against fingers that hadn't noticed the cold. Reception came next. A cramped municipal room with brown carpet and white walls that drank every sound. Folding chairs. Soggy biscuits. Someone coughed too often. A cousin he didn't recognize spoke about bloodlines and forgiveness. No one listened. A probate officer approached without ceremony. Offered a manila envelope, sealed and unsigned. No will, no property, only this. Paper thinned from years of handling. Ink bled just enough to show age. A sequence of numbers. Nothing else. Not coordinates at first glance. Too sparse, too simple. But old habits don't die. The hand had drawn them in a familiar way. One digit, slight pause, another pair, followed by a decimal and a tilt. Latitude and longitude. Eastern steppe, low elevation, somewhere just below a mountain shelf that had defied all contour logic. It pulled something sharp from memory. Dust choking an old Jeep, a cracked lens on a camera, a compass needle that never rested. A boy had died on that trip. Heart failure. Sudden. They'd packed up by dawn. The page felt warm despite the chill. Every edge soft from touch. He turned it over. Blank. No notes. No names. Just coordinates, quiet, almost shy in their presence. A kind of message not meant to be read aloud. Years had passed since he'd looked at a map that wasn't digital, but this one burned behind his eyes like it had waited. Filing cabinets stacked along the study wall hadn't been opened in over a decade. Dust lined the metal teeth. He reached past old charts, campaign maps from abandoned projects, folders marked with brittle tape. Near the back, one unlabeled box. Inside, only one folder, red binding still intact, though warped from moisture. Survey photos. Altitude readings. A topographic scan printed from an early satellite composite. Blurred edges. Distortion along the magnetic lines. Notes scribbled in the margins from a hand grown younger by 20 years. One section circled in blue. Not ink, grease pencil. It hadn't faded. Same coordinate. He sat without realizing. The chair creaked under the weight of posture held too long. Light from the window had changed. Rain softened to mist, clinging to glass panes and stretching shadows along the wooden floor. The room had not been this quiet in years. Or maybe silence had only just begun to mean something. He remembered standing over that ridge, boots sinking into loose soil, hands on hips, wind cutting so sharply it blurred thought. Instruments had jammed. Radio static snapped through each attempt to call back to camp. A photograph had been taken, though the film later warped. Trees had leaned in directions that defied the slope. Nothing grew in the center. The boy had wandered out alone. Found him by the creek, eyes wide open, skin cold. Not a mark on him. No one filed a report. A rusted compass sat in a drawer beneath the desk. He pulled it free, set it on the folder. The needle twitched, tapped once, then stopped short of north. No magnets nearby. No reason. He hadn't thought about that place in years. Hadn't spoken of it. Not even to the man who'd written down those numbers, and died alone in a city that no longer remembered his face. Rain began again, softer this time, like it had changed its mind. Through the glass, the street lights flickered to life. The coordinates waited. There was dust caked in the fabric of the tents by the second night. Not the dry, powdery kind that lifts and floats, but heavy, clinging, pressed deep into seams like ash. Wind hadn't stopped since they crossed into the plateau's edge, cutting sideways through every zipper, turning maps brittle within minutes. The guide kept quiet. Too quiet. His boots sank lower into the soil with each step, like the ground didn't want to let go. No signals came through after the first ridge. Radios squealed, then flattened into silence. One handheld scanner read full signal from a tower 80 kilometers behind them, but the screen pulsed wrong. Frequencies scrambled, names of channels sliding in and out like tide. The equipment had been triple-checked in Almaty. No malfunctions logged. Moss on the boulders pointed west instead of north. It had taken 2 days to reach the rise overlooking the basin. On paper, the terrain showed shallow dips and flat stretches, nothing unusual. In person, elevation defied every recorded gradient. Steps shortened. Breath slowed. The space between trees stretched unnaturally wide, not by distance but by sensation. Shadows pooled in places where no sun should have broken through. They made camp on a narrow shelf, sheltered between rock formations etched with deep, uneven groove. Not carvings. Not erosion. Just long, smooth indentations where stone wore away without visible cause. The youngest member of the group, arms crossed and head low, pointed out that his GPS had rebooted 5 times since morning. The location marker refused to hold still. The others laughed. Tired laughter. That kind of brittle sound people make when they've convinced themselves discomfort is temporary. At 3 a.m, someone screamed. Not loud, not prolonged. A sharp intake, a thud, followed by boots scattering across loose rock. The medic arrived first. Hands shaking. Eyes stuck wide open, not on the body, but just beyond it. A boy, no more than 22, lay curled against a tree trunk. No wounds. No sign of a fall. Pulse thin. Breathing shallow. One leg twitched at intervals, no rhythm to it. He stared upward, mouth moving in tight gasps, lips forming shapes that didn't match any word. 4 hours later, silence. They wrapped him in 2 sleeping bags and placed him inside the supply tent. The guide muttered something under his breath before crossing himself. No one asked what it meant. Compasses failed the next morning. Not in the usual way. Needles hovered somewhere between south and southwest, then jerked sharply east every few seconds, like a dog sniffing at something behind glass. Metal objects gathered condensation. Binocular lenses fogged in direct sunlight. Batteries drained faster than backup packs could charge. No wildlife appeared. Not a single bird. No insects. No movement in the brush, even when wind pushed hard against the trees. When the decision came to turn back, no one argued. They packed without speaking, eyes fixed low, as if something unseen perched just beyond the next ridge. Climbing out took longer than it should have. The slope felt steeper on exit. One man tore the sole of his boot. Another vomited twice before reaching the vehicle. No photographs survived. Film reels returned blank. Digital files corrupted. A single topographic scan, saved from an older device, bore a jagged interference pattern across the middle third of the image, like something unseen had bent the terrain inward. No one filed an official statement. The report marked as inconclusive. Weather anomalies. Equipment inconsistency. Unverified seizure. Some maps were never published. Some locations left unnamed by choice. Back in the city, the equipment sat untouched in a crate for years. One compass, its casing scratched and needle bent, rested at the bottom. The final coordinates logged before failure matched the numbers found in that envelope, down to the 4th decimal. Nothing else had ever aligned that perfectly. The screen took longer than usual to load. Connection hadn't faltered, but something about the page dragged as if reluctant. Blue grid lines blinked into place, one after another, drawing coordinates across a satellite image where cloud cover hung too low for comfort. A dry plain, gray-brown, split by a narrow treeline, sharp against soft terrain. No roads. No habitation markers. Just numbers stamped along the edge, confirming what memory already knew. The cursor hovered. Scrolling down led to nothing of interest. Outdated survey scans. Declassified fragments. Half-rendered map layers where topography faded into algorithmic shadow. He switched to archival overlay, more out of habit than hope. Old military data sometimes carried strange artifacts, bits of the past no one had bothered to filter out. The photograph wasn't labeled with a caption. Just a date, 1936. Location tag read Vestland, Norway. Sepia tones bled into uneven exposure. Soldiers stood in 2 rows, uniforms inconsistent. One bore a foreign armband, another held a folded flag too worn to identify. Behind them, rows of stone markers, some leaning, one cracked at the base. The photograph tilted slightly to the right, like whoever held the camera hadn't cared to correct it. He zoomed in. No faces caught the eye. Nothing unusual about the soldiers, nothing staged. Boots half sunk into wet grass. A breeze had lifted someone's collar. Eyes tired, unfocused, as if pulled from sleep. But the corner held something that didn't match. Third stone from the edge, near the right border. Lichen-covered, rough cut. Shorter than the rest. Uneven inscription. The name caught first, Alejandro Cortez. Beneath it, in smaller font, numbers. Not dates. Not identification code. Latitude. Longitude. The same set. Every decimal. He stared without blinking. 2 minutes passed, maybe more. The edge of the screen dimmed from inactivity. A man born in Kudus. Died in Norway. No war records. Not a soldier. Naval logs confirmed him as a merchant sailor. Transported canned goods, coastal to coastal. No record of military entanglement. No cause of death publicly listed. Just a gravestone, out of place, carved with numbers that should have meant nothing in 1935. The granite looked newer than the stones around it, but the photo said otherwise. Time had worn its corners. The engraving lacked precision, no stonemason's hand. More like someone with a chisel and too little light. He searched the name. Obscure passenger manifest surfaced. A customs report from Bergen, dated August of the same year. Nothing strange. Departure never confirmed. Arrival logged without signature. Someone buried him within months. But why here? Why this site? Why coordinates nearly 5,000 kilometers east? He pulled the image into editing software, sharpened the resolution along the bottom third. The numbers didn't waver. No image artifact, no lens distortion. Just clean, deliberate marks, each digit carved deep enough to catch light. Hands gripped the edge of the desk without realizing. Breath shallowed. The room dimmed around the monitor's glow. Streetlights cast a slant across floorboards, catching dust that hadn't moved in days. No answers came. Only the certainty that something had shifted. Not outside. Not in the world. But in whatever compass had quietly ticked inside him since the first time those coordinates appeared. A needle unspun. A direction not chosen, but remembered. He leaned in, forehead nearly touching glass, as if closeness could pull meaning from stone. The silence felt new. Not absence of sound, but space waiting to be filled. The same numbers. On a grave in a foreign country. Belonging to a man who never should have known them. Mornings blurred into each other. Coffee stained the edges of legal pads where names sprawled in uneven handwriting, ink pressed too deep by a hand unused to this kind of searching. Not maps this time. Not terrain or elevation. Just the silence of record halls and the half-answers of people who spent too much time surrounded by things long buried. He started with Turkey. A historian replied to his message 3 days late. She wasn't sure why the stones stood in that section of the cemetery. Wrong language, wrong era, wrong script. A boy 15 years old. Drowned in a flood. Parents' names missing. Birthplace unknown. The grave had sat unvisited for over a century. A small marble slab, chipped at the base, set apart from the others by 4 inches of grass that never quite blended in. Beneath the name, Samuel Erdem, a pair of coordinates carved in an almost ceremonial line. No other markings. Zimbabwe followed. Harder to access, slower to track. An archivist working out of Bulawayo responded late at night, attaching a blurred photograph. Clay cross, slumped forward into dry earth. Half erased by rain and time. Josephine Moyle. Died in 1948. Cause, starvation. A minor famine, overlooked by history, footnoted in agricultural reports that nobody read anymore. The stone held. Beneath the name, scratched faintly in the lower corner, just above the dirt line, numbers. No units, no symbols. Just numbers that no one thought to question. He began waking with them. Not thoughts, not dreams. Just fragments. A child's handwriting in chalk. A receipt without a total. The hum of insects that didn't exist in this part of the world. Argentina. Rosario Province. 2003. No need for historians this time, a cemetery worker uploaded their entire ledger. Digital grave map. Interactive records. He scrolled by instinct, no real plan, just a low urge pulling southward through search field. One entry caught. Miguel Dominguez. 39. Former insurance clerk. Death by electrical accident during a home renovation. The tombstone bore a simple arch, black stone, modern cut. No religious emblem. Beneath the epitaph, a line that looked at first like an ID number. Same sequence. Same shape. Too exact to be a mistake. South Korea came last. Incheon. The cemetery sat beside an old Buddhist temple, wind-worn, half-forgotten between residential expansion. A local student sent a short video, panning low over a grave that barely stood out among hundreds. Shin Dae-hoon. Died 1976. Fire accidental. The marker didn't match temple design. Granite, dark, western shape. But the soil, the flowers, the incense trays, all local. All correct for the space. Beneath the carved name, beneath even the dates, the digits sat buried under soot from old offerings. Different religions. Different continents. No shared bloodlines. No common affiliations. 5 lives ended by accident or misfortune. 5 stones built in places with no reason to share anything. 5 locations speaking the same sentence without language. Each time, the coordinates reappeared with the same precision. No degree off. Not a single misplacement. No one had asked for these graves to exist. No one remembered the choices that put those numbers in granite. It had started to weigh differently. Not just discovery. Not fascination. Something closer to recognition. Not of people. Not of places. Of repetition. Quiet repetition. As if a story had been told many times, across soil, across language, and still no one had heard it. The papers didn't lie flat. Corners curled from moisture or age, no 2 sheets the same thickness. Ink shifted tones across languages, fonts stretched or cramped depending on who had written them. He laid them side by side, floor cleared, lights dimmed. The room took on a kind of hush, not silence, but the pause between things that should never touch. 5 obituaries. Not arranged chronologically. Not by continent. Just in the order his hands placed them, as if some unseen rhythm had made the choice first. He read slowly. The boy from Turkey had been found near a dried-up irrigation canal, eyes open, lungs half full of mud. The family believed he had followed birds. No one had seen them. Days earlier, a neighbor said the child had drawn strange symbols in the dirt behind their house. When pressed, the woman remembered one detail clearly. A circle with a line through it, and a small square just beneath. She thought it was a game. The woman from Zimbabwe had spent her final weeks walking. No known destination. A village elder noted she left at sunrise and returned after dusk, covered in dust, hands scratched, lips cracked but unspeaking. A niece described her turning pages of an old-school atlas each evening, nodding at nothing, humming songs unfamiliar to anyone in the household. The day she collapsed, a scrap of paper was found in her dress pocket. Coordinates. No explanation. The Korean man had left a single line in his will. Not addressed to family, not part of any legal requirement. Written in thick pencil across the back of a photo: mountain slope, out of focus, trees indistinct. Below it, I saw the clearing again. It has changed. He had never left the country. The Argentine clerk had no known interest in geography, no record of travel beyond city limit. But his browser history told a different story. Search terms strung together in messy urgency. Topographic scan, Northern Ridge Forest anomaly, unidentified elevation signature, East Kazakhstan baseplate. Every tab led to the same place. A week before his death, he rented a car. Returned it early. The odometer showed 200 kilometers more than logged. The Spanish sailor's letters, mailed infrequently across years, hinted at dreams. Short lines about cold trees, soil that shifted underfoot, stars that wouldn't hold still. The last envelope, never sent, contained a sketch. Not a map. More like a memory. Tree rings drawn in concentric arcs, broken by an unnatural gap. No names. No roads. Just a coordinate pair scratched into the lower corner. 5 people. 5 different decades. 5 routes with no intersection. Except one. Each had, at some point in their final weeks, drawn toward the same region. Some by instinct. Others by design. No tourism records. No official missions. Yet all showed signs of proximity. Geographic noise at the edges of their routines. A town passed through. A road detoured without cause. A dream that turned their body east. None had spoken of ritual. None had been part of any rite. But their actions mirrored something close. A choreography not taught, only repeated. Steps taken not for belief, but because the steps were always there, waiting. They moved toward the coordinates, not as seekers, as if called by something they had never agreed to hear. The plane landed with a shudder that rattled the teeth. No announcements, no ceremony. Just the thunk of wheels meeting tarmac and the hiss of brakes gripping too hard. Outside the window, air shimmered over cracked asphalt. Mountains loomed low in the distance, their outlines soft against a sky too pale for the hour. Passengers disembarked without speaking. No one met anyone's gaze. In the arrivals hall, fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead, one bulb sputtering at irregular intervals near the corner bench. He passed through customs with minimal resistance. Passport stamped without comment. Eyes glanced, not searched. The officer didn't ask questions. No one ever did when silence already carried more weight than answers. A man waited outside, leaning against a faded sedan with one door painted a different color. No introduction. No handshake. Only a curt nod before dropping the bag into the back seat and pulling onto the road. The route curved south, away from the city's edge, into scrubland where trees bowed inward without wind and fences marked nothing. Neither of them spoke during the first hour. The driver kept both hands on the wheel. Past a narrow bridge, signs grew sparse. Asphalt gave way to gravel. Buildings fell behind. Cell signal blinked once, then died. An old gas station appeared near a bend, shutters drawn, fuel pumps capped with rusted lids. 2 soldiers stood near the doorway. No insignias. Just green uniforms and long shadows. The car slowed near a junction where dirt split into 3 directions. A barrier had been dragged across the middle road. Concrete slabs, metal poles, a rusted gate padlocked without signage. Beyond it, tire tracks carved into loose soil, fresh enough to raise dust. A single vehicle, black with no plates, sat idling 50 meters beyond the barricade. Windows tinted. Engine running. No movement inside. The driver muttered something under his breath and reversed without being asked. In the next village, shutters clapped closed at the sight of a stranger. Curtains twitched. Children herded indoors without hesitation. He approached the market, a wooden structure with no posted hours. The woman behind the counter smiled once, Thin, practiced, already fading before it reached her eyes. No one sold maps. No one carried paper goods. A man seated near the rear, boots on a crate, offered a weathered cigarette and asked where the foreigner planned to walk. The coordinates were spoken once. The man did not reply. Later that afternoon, near the base of a dry ravine, a young woman approached without introduction. She carried a notebook bound in rubber bands. Dust clung to her sleeves, fingernails lined with red soil. Her accent bent the vowels as she spoke, English filtered through caution. She hadn't worked long in the region. Still finishing her postgraduate fieldwork. Had stumbled on something strange during a seismic reading, small tremors with no pattern. Local magnetic fluctuations. Readings inconsistent with known geology. When she submitted her preliminary findings, the university cut funding without explanation. No replacement team sent. No comment from sponsors. She lowered her voice. 6 months ago, trucks arrived. Not local. No registration. No documentation filed with municipal offices. Concrete poured in silence. An octagonal structure rose within 4 days. No machinery remained after the 5th. Armed personnel stationed at the perimeter wore no flag. Barriers extended 2 kilometers in each direction. A fence was erected, topped with wires that hummed low even without power. She hadn't gone back. What lay at those coordinates had been sealed under poured cement, surrounded by silence thicker than distance. No aerial shots. No satellite updates. Only a gray blur where terrain used to be. The shape had 8 sides. She didn't know why. She didn't want to. The equipment wasn't new, but it had never misread elevation. Not once. The scanner picked up incline where none existed, terrain sloping inward by half a meter along a flat plane. No visual dip. No structural change. Just numbers bending in ways no surveyor would accept without protest. He adjusted settings twice. Readings didn't shift. Magnetometer stuttered near the ridge. North leapt 2 degrees west, held for 12 seconds, snapped back without cue. He ran the calibration again. Same jump. Same timing. The interval felt rhythmic, but not mechanical. No pulse, no hum. Just absence, like space folding too tight against itself. At the edge of the ridge, birds flew wide arcs, never crossing the center line. Flocks approached from the south, curved hard east, regrouped only once distance had grown. He noted it without comment. Spotted feathers on the ground, no bodies. No wings torn, no signs of fight. Just feathers, dropped in 3s, always near the same point. The hotel clerk wouldn't meet his eyes when he asked for directions to the forest road. Said the bridge was washed out. It wasn't. Tires left prints in the clay the day before. No rain had fallen in weeks. In the village square, an old man sat on a plastic chair beneath a torn awning, chewing seeds one by one. His voice cracked at the mention of the treeline. Said sheep wandered off during shearing season, only the wool found again, tangled in underbrush 20 meters high. Claimed trees on the north edge bloomed white in September, not spring, petals turning to ash before reaching the ground. Laughed once. Not from amusement. From distance. As if memory wasn't his to hold. A woman brought her watch to him. Plastic strap. Digital face. She held it up without a word. Time advanced too fast, 4 seconds every hour. Her husband's watch ran slow, 5 seconds behind each day. Neither adjusted. Batteries checked, replaced. Still wrong. He thanked her. She didn't reply. South of the boundary, grass grew thicker, deeper in tone, wet despite dry heat. North, the earth dried too fast. Cracks spidered across ground that hadn't been walked in weeks. Ants carried dead leaves in circles, no destination. Each colony moved around the radius, never through. He dropped a compass at the threshold, tied to a string. Pulled it forward inch by inch. The needle twitched at 1 meter, spun once at 2, froze near 3. No magnetic base beneath. No metallic deposits in the soil. No power lines overhead. Still, the spin came again, slower this time, like it was listening. trees stood too still. No rustle in their tops, even when wind pulled at his sleeves. One branch had sprouted buds near its base, off-season, off-pattern, out of sync. Leaves showed mold at the edges, though rain hadn't fallen. He touched one. Skin tingled. He walked back without measuring distance. His notes didn't capture it. Not the way silence moved just beyond perception. Not the way sound stopped carrying between steps. A crow called once from behind the ridge. Nothing answered. The 2-kilometer line had no markings, no walls, no signs. Just a boundary that didn't announce itself. Only responded. He stood outside it for hours. Waited. Measured. Waited again. The hallway light outside his door swayed without wind. A single bulb, hanging low, casting a weak circle that didn't quite touch the threshold. Key turned slower than usual, catching at the base as if the lock had already moved once that day. Inside, nothing looked out of place. Bag untouched. Drawers closed. Window shut. Bed still made with the corners folded the way housekeeping always did. One too tight, one a little loose. But the air felt wrong. Not stale. Not musty. Too clean. As if something had been wiped away. On the mirror above the sink, marker ink in 5 tight loop. Same set of numbers, same coordinate pair, written over and over in a clockwise motion. Each circle slightly thicker than the last. The pressure changed halfway through. 3rd loop pressed harder, tip fraying. By the 5th, the line wobbled, hand giving out or mind breaking rhythm. He checked his bag. Nothing missing. Every page of the notebook still there. Recorder untouched. USB drives aligned exactly as he left them. The door hadn't been forced. That night, he sat with the maps again. Spread across the bed in uneven stacks, overlapping at edges. One topographic report showed a microburst in soil density near the site perimeter. Not enough to raise alarm, but the pattern repeated every 33 hours. Another scan showed tree distribution anomalies. Growth rates compressed, stunted by something beyond known drought variables. His pen fell once, rolled toward the bedpost. When he leaned to pick it up, light caught the mirror again. The 5th circle, thicker than the rest. He stared at it too long. At 2:14 in the morning, his vision narrowed. Pressure pressed behind his eyes, not pain, more like something clamped tight just above the jaw. He reached for water, knocked it over, fingers fumbling without control. Breath came in short pulls. Ears filled with a sound that didn't rise but tunneled inward. No tone. No rhythm. Not even pitch. Just pressure. He collapsed across the notebook. A technician found him at dawn. The cleaning staff had reported the door unlocked. He hadn't remembered leaving it so. The hospital walls hummed low beneath the fluorescent panels. A nurse asked him questions through a translator. Name. Date of birth. Allergies. Past episodes. Had he ever experienced seizures? He shook his head. Mouth dry. Memory fractured. She paused. Not the usual kind, she said. Auditory. Not voices. Not music. Just interference. Sound that lives behind other sound. Sound that doesn't ask for attention until the body can't ignore it. The curtain didn't move. Window closed. Still, he could feel air shifting in the room. Like something breathed that wasn't lungs. The notebook sat on the chair across from him. Page open. Circle 5. The email arrived without subject. No sender address. No greeting. Just a single attachment, low resolution, slightly tilted, grain pressed flat like it had been compressed too many times. He clicked without thinking. The image filled the screen, slow to render. Graveyard. Shallow hill. Iron gate just visible in the background. A bench with chipped paint. Tree stump to the left, cut smooth, fresh edge paler than the ground around it. The headstone stood near center. Gray marble, thin, upright. No flowers, no frame. Nowhere. His name. Each letter carved clean, no erosion, no age. Below that, his date of birth. Correct to the day. No second date. Just space left blank. Waiting. Underneath, the same coordinate. Perfect alignment. decimal precision untouched. He stared too long to feel the moment pass. Time bent inward. The screen light dimmed. One hand trembled against the desk, but not from fear, more like distance, like the hand no longer belonged where it was. He checked the metadata. The image had been taken 4 days earlier. Location matched a cemetery he barely noticed from the window of the passing car, just beyond a gas station with shuttered doors and a rusted sign twisted east by wind. He had passed it without slowing. No reason to stop. The name of the place hadn't stayed in memory. It hadn't needed to. Every detail in the photograph was correct. Sky clouded low, grass wet around the base, tire marks faint along the gravel path leading through the main gate. A footprint near the edge. Heel dragging slightly, right foot deeper than the left. Whoever had been there left no name. He downloaded the image once. Saved it to the desktop. Didn't open it again. No one knocked at the door that evening, but he kept glancing toward it. Kept waiting for something he couldn't name to arrive. Not presence. Not figure. Just the sense that whatever had started wasn't moving toward him. It had always been here. The story hadn't begun with discovery. Not with the photograph from Norway. Not with the boy in Turkey or the woman in Zimbabwe. Not even with the envelope passed by a silent probate officer on a day of too much rain. It began earlier, when a pair of numbers first printed behind his eyes. Before he saw them. Before he knew what they meant. Before the map. Before the questions. The moment he looked. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.